Before we begin, if you enjoy immersive stories that feel like cinema in your ears, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. It helps bring more of these narratives to life. You won't believe what happened next. It all started on a day that seemed ordinary but changed everything. What you're about to hear is something no one ever forgot. The sun was still crawling behind the patchwork of colored houses, a slow golden smear inching over corrugated roofs and tangled lines of laundry. On the hill, where the alleys braided into a maze and the air smelled of coffee, frying dough, and damp concrete, an experienced policeman named Miguel Alves pulled on his vest with a careful motion that felt ritualistic. He wore two truths on his chest like twin badges no one else could see: the cold weight of duty to protect, and the heavier, invisible mass of a place that never asked to be a battleground. He wasn't there to hunt enemies. He was there to make sure innocence didn't turn into statistics whispered at dinner tables and shouted across news feeds. If the world liked its stories simple, the Hill didn't. And as Miguel kissed the sleeping foreheads of his children, Thiago's hair sticking in small rebellious spikes, Sophia hugging a stuffed rabbit worn from years of love, and pressed his hand gently to his wife Anna's shoulder before stepping into the dawn, he didn't know that this was his last goodbye. But there was something there. Something that would change everything. The radio crackled in the unit like an anxious swallow. "Unit Aguia 3, clear for ascent," said the voice of Captain Marquez, tight and efficient. "Intel indicates movement near the old water tower. Teams to establish corridor toward the clinic and school." Miguel met the eyes of his partners, Helena, whose eyes were the soft gray of early morning and whose hands could steady anyone's panic, Santos, all angles and jokes that never quite landed, and Rico, who had a quiet way of counting breaths in the loudest moments. They were stripes of the same fabric, woven by trust more than protocol. "Remember," Miguel said, checking his earpiece, "we keep the corridor open. No cowboy stuff. We're not here to break the place to fix it." He could feel the Hill listening. From windows and doorways, from rooftops and behind curtains, faces watched and pretended not to. Chickens clucked along staircases. A dog with one ear folded wrong tracked them with an old soldier's curiosity. A teenage boy dribbled a ragged soccer ball, trying to pretend his heart wasn't beating too fast. Miguel nodded at him and at Dona Celia, the elder who kept the corner bodega like a church and knew every child by the weight of their steps. "Bom dia," he said gently, and she waved a hand without quite smiling. "There are people here," he reminded himself. "Not chess pieces, not shadows." He adjusted his vest again, and beneath the Kevlar he felt the thump of his heart, steady but alert. His heart was pounding faster with every second the deeper they moved. The lanes were narrow and full of echoes, sounds ricocheting off cement walls, laughter 2 alleys over, the clink of a spoon against glass, a transistor radio crooning a Faro song someone was too in love with to turn off even at this hour. A mural of saints and soccer stars painted in flaking color watched them pass. There was a myth that the Hill slept late. It didn't. It only pretended to. They formed a line, boots brushing puddles, radios low, weapons held with the reverence of surgeons who knew what a single cut could change. Helena whispered, "Movement, roofline 2 o'clock," and Miguel felt the day crystallize like a lens snapping into focus. But what happened next no one could have imagined. It wasn't gunfire. It was a cry, sharp and frightened, followed by the staccato sound of wood splintering. Miguel pivoted, hand up, and the team fanned into a tight, tucked diamond. A door burst open 3 houses down, and a man stumbled out, shirtless, his hands up, eyes wild. "Minha filha," he stammered. The steps collapsed, "she's inside." The alley gave a shiver as a slab of broken stair shifted, a moan of hurt concrete. Miguel moved before anyone told him to. "Helena, cover. Santos, with me. Rico, secure the perimeter," he said, tearing through the doorway into the blue-walled house. He could hear the small, panicked sobbing from somewhere in the dim. Dust danced in a narrow shaft of sun like startled moths. "Where are you?" he called, voice steady as a lifeline. "I'm here," came a tiny voice from beneath the broken stairs. The steps had given way, a jagged mouth of plaster and stone swallowing the hollow space. A little girl's fingers reached out, trembling, nothing else. No blood, he didn't see what had pinned her. I'm going to get you out, Miguel said. No theatrics, just a promise shaped like certainty. He slung his rifle behind him, slipped his arm into the space, felt around. Wooden planks and a shard of ceramic pressed against his skin. He could hear Helena outside speaking in that calming tone she kept for mothers and old men, a music that slowed time. He found her foot, trapped between a beam and the collapsed side wall. The beam groaned like an animal. For a second he saw his own daughter's toes curling when she slept. With careful leverage, bracing his body against the frame, Miguel lifted. The beam bit his shoulder with a blunt, unforgiving weight. One breath, another. The child wriggled, a quick, bright fish of movement. And then she was free, and he pulled her out and into her father's arms, and the father cried in the way only grown men do when the universe returns a piece of their soul. Outdoors, under the thin morning sun, Miguel heard the first distant pop they'd been waiting to either hear and fear or never hear at all. The radio snipped quick sentences. Unknown shooters near the water tower. Copy. School perimeter compromised. Negative, hold corridor. Captain Marquez's voice snapped like wire. Miguel exhaled. The map of the hill reassembled in his mind, every alley and stairwell like veins etched in the back of his hand. He walked them enough times not to be a stranger. He had eaten guava candy from that stoop, had sat with Dona Celia counting coins during a storm when the power went out and the generator stalled, had found clues about real crises not from informants but from grumbling old men playing dominoes and teenage girls braiding each other's hair and calling him Tio with mockery that wasn't unkind. He was not naive. He had lost friends. He had carried a partner down steps slick with rain and fear. He had closed eyes that would never open again. But he had also learned that courage without tenderness could be dangerous, and law without love could be cruel. The world had drawn a line and told him to stand on one side. The hill had smudged that line every day. "We go slow," Miguel said, and they moved again. The alley cinched tighter, turning them into whispers. Laundry was hung like flags of ordinary life, blue shirts, white sheets, a skirt with sunflowers that flapped lazy as if none of this concerned it. Halfway to the old water tower, they passed the path that led to the school. Laughter and the scrape of chairs told him a class was already in session. He pictured notebooks, crooked handwriting, a teacher's chalk-smeared fingers. He pictured a boy named Mattias he had met last month, who kept a violin in a case too big for his small frame and practiced scales so carefully you couldn't interrupt him with a decibel meter. It steadied him. A metallic clatter spilled from a rooftop in Silva. The lookout, who sometimes pretended not to recognize Miguel even though he did, disappeared into the shadows. "Eyes up," Santos murmured. "Copy," Miguel replied without anger. He had never enjoyed the theater of retorts. When you treated a place as enemy territory, it became one. That morning, it was a neighborhood wearing its fears on its sleeves. A van slunk across an intersection 2 levels above them, white but not clean, the kind that had been many colors in other lives. Its taillights flickered with a message only the hill could read. Miguel felt the small hairs on his arms stand up. There was something off, a quiet that wasn't peace but pause. There was something there, something that would change everything. "Helena," he said low, "you see the van." "Saw it," she murmured. "Plates. Covered." She didn't have to say it, they'd seen it before. Plan A was slipping, and Plan B was hesitation dressed as patience. They approached the plaza below the water tower, the heart of an older era when the hill had been a village, when mothers drew water and traded news under the same steel skeleton now rusting like memory. A small market had assembled despite warnings, cantaloupes with scarred skins open to show their sweetness, children clutching coins like talismans, a woman selling pastel and passing napkins with hands that didn't shake even though her eyes did. Miguel raised a hand. "Wait." Marquez in his ear said, "Aguia 3, hold, teams circling from east alleys." Then suddenly a shot, not a barrage. A single bullet that sang against concrete and made everyone crouch as if the sky had sneezed razors. Then 2 more. The market collapsed inward, stall owners diving for cover, fruit rolling in frantic parabolas. Miguel guided a teenager behind a pillar and pressed his own back into the cool damp of a wall. "Angle?" he asked. 3 stories up, yellow house with the broken window," Rico said, "all steel now. I've got a glint." No return fire unless you have positive ID and a clean line, Miguel ordered. We're not painting targets, we're saving people. He peered. The broken window looked back like a missing tooth. His pulse climbed a ladder in his throat. There's a shadow, Santos whispered. Careful, Helena said. Light's tricky. Moments like this stretched like warm taffy, thin but resilient. The market reshaped itself from panic to stillness, the collective wisdom of a place that had learned not to flinch too long. A boy in uniform clutched a book to his chest and watched Miguel the way a drowning swimmer watches a lifeguard with equal parts desperation and awe. Stay behind the pillar, Miguel mouthed, and the boy nodded, eyes huge. The radio spat names and numbers. Marquez refused to authorize an advance. Do not escalate, he warned, and his voice tripped on the edge of fear. We still need that corridor to the clinic, do not forget. The clinic. A woman had arrived there last night, 8 months, hypertension, on bed rest. She needed a quiet route out if there was going to be trouble. Miguel kept that picture as a compass. We hold, he said. But what happened next no one could have imagined. A figure flickered in the broken tooth of the window, and Miguel saw not a rifle, not a blade, but a camera, not a reporter. A kid, maybe 17, holding his phone like a talisman, filming the world so it wouldn't swallow him whole. The glint had been the lens, the first shot from somewhere else. The second, a rumor's echo, a distant smack again. The sound told him a rooftop, metal against metal decoy. He tracked the sound through memory, through the hill's habits. The van again. Suspicion moved like a shadow at his heels. It's a sweep, he said. They want us pinned, want panic at the tower, want to open a lane somewhere else. East Alleys, Helena asked. Or the school, he said, and felt cold. The school, no. He checked his watch as if time itself could shift the opposite way and spare them. Helena, take Rico, move to the school perimeter now. Discreet. Santos, hold with me, he said. Marquez snapped. Alves, you don't split the team without. We're not splitting, we're multiplying, Miguel said. His voice had a soft stubbornness that could carve through granite. I'll keep the plaza steady. They need certainty more than they need a shield. A silence followed, the kind that isn't consent but trust wearing a frown. Proceed, Marquez said tightly. The market breathed again, shallow but real. Miguel scanned the balconies and saw familiar eyes. He put his weapon low, a visible choice. We're not here to fight you, he called, not loud, but the hill can amplify anything it wants. We're here so your kids can get home. The words drank the air, and something in the tension eased a notch. And then he saw Mattias, the violin kid, crossing the far edge of the plaza, case bigger than his arm, chin high because that was the only boulder he could carry. He was heading toward the school. Mattias, Miguel said, stepping into his path, and the boy's face flickered from defiance to relief to embarrassment. You going to rehearsal? They won't let us cancel, the boy said in a tone that echoed someone else's bravado. Our recital is Saturday. Good, Miguel said. Run the G major arpeggios for me today. I will, Mattias said. He looked at the case, then at Miguel's vest, then at the sky. Is this going to be on the news? That depends, Miguel said. On what? On us, Miguel said. All of us. He watched the boy disappear up the steps that zigzagged like a heartbeat, and his chest did that strange, tight, sweet thing that was hope's unwelcome, necessary cousin. But what happened next no one could have imagined. A noise like a soda can crushed and thrown from a height skittered across the plaza. Miguel's head snapped toward it. The white van was back, reversing down a slope it had no business on, tires scraping stone, rear doors shaking. He saw the reflection of faces in the rear glass, the kind of still faces that always made him colder than faces contorted by rage. Rico, Miguel hissed into the radio. We see it, Rico said, breath quick. East Alley, it's not going to the school, it's going to the clinic. The clinic. For a second, all the math in the world rearranged itself into a new answer. No, Miguel said. His voice made the word heavy. Block the alley too tight, Helena said. We can't swing in time. It'll slide right past. There's a side path you can reach from the plaza through the Taylor's Lane, the one with the blue string lights. I know it, Miguel said. He did. He knew it like muscle. Santos with me. And then they were running, boots hammering rhythms into stone, the air crisp in their mouths, the world telescoping into the length of a single alley that had been a different sort of journey on lazy afternoons, when he'd wandered there off duty and bought guava paste, wrapped in paper from a man who called him Mu Patrão, with gentle irony. The lights were still strung even though the power ran only every other day now. They looked silly and brave in the slanted morning. At the mouth of the lane, a shape, then two young men trying to look like the van wasn't behind them. Miguel lifted his hand. "Stop. We can talk," he said. They did what young men afraid of other men do. They ran. He didn't chase. He slid toward the clinic's side and felt the nudge of something invisible. He came out onto the side street where the clinic's door sat like a tired eye, a nurse with her hair in a bun already braced in the frame. "It's okay," she said to someone inside without looking at Miguel. He could hear women's voices, a soft moan, the hiss of someone trying not to cry. The van's wheels growled on the stones above. Santos took the side position, low, quiet. The van's nose appeared, tilting like a curious animal, then the whole mouth of it as it swung down, doors rattling. On the doors, a sticker peeled half off, an old delivery company logo faded to a ghost. "Helena," Miguel said. "1 minute behind you," her voice came. 1 minute can be a universe. The van slowed. Miguel stepped toward it, not in front, not to block, just to be in the path of choices. He kept his weapon canted, not pointed. "Stop," he said in a tone that had stopped children and grown men from doing things they'd regret. The driver's face was young, hair shaved clean, eyes too big and a face too thin. Something flickered there that Miguel had seen in mirrors at 3 in the morning. The passenger door opened an inch. A hand, empty, showed itself. "Out," Miguel said, slowly. The door clicked. A shoulder appeared, then the rest of a young man with a nervous mouth. "We have medicine," he said, a strange sentence. "The clinics aren't getting supplies. We have formula antibiotics. We're taking care of our people because no one else does." It could be true and still be wrong. It could be a lie with truth wrapped around it like a coat. Miguel's eyes flicked to the rear doors. He imagined rifles, imagined crates, imagined babies' milk that would become a headline either way. There was something there, something that would change everything. "If you have medicine, you can let the nurse see it," Miguel said. "You can do this the right way." The driver swallowed. The van inched forward, a dare. Santos' weight shifted, a whisper of movement. Time stretched again, and in the space between seconds, Miguel saw a hallway that existed only in the mind. One door labeled duty, another labeled mercy. He had always tried to keep both open. His heart rattled the cage of his ribs. His heart was pounding faster with every second. "You don't want to do this," he said quietly. The passenger looked at him like someone looking at a cliff, terrified and a little enthralled by the drop. "We can't stop," the boy said. He didn't finish. "The world doesn't always let you pronounce your fear." "Open the back," Miguel said. He moved a step closer. And the driver made a choice. Not the worst one, not the best. He swerved, not at Miguel, but enough to break the standoff, enough to wedge the van's body against the narrow of the lane. Tires squealing, one wheel lifting. The rear doors, badly latched, bounced. A box slid free and split, powder-white formula ghosting into the air like a small, desperate cloud. And beneath that box, another. A low, long package wrapped in plastic that didn't look like any medicine a clinic would need. In that moment, he realized there was no turning back. "Santos," Miguel said low, and his partner moved like a hinge, sliding to cover as the driver slammed the van back into gear. The engine coughed, the back doors flapped, and something inside banged loud enough to turn stomachs to ice. The nurse gasped, pulling the clinic door tight. A window shattered somewhere up the lane, the sound of fear ricocheting. "Stop the vehicle," Miguel commanded, the sound of years in the cadence. The driver looked at him, boy to man, and for a breath the hill held its breath with them. Then the driver made a small sign with his hand, a gesture that could have been apology or defiance, and stomped on the accelerator. The van lurched. Miguel stepped in, fired one short, precise shot at the front tire, as clean and cold as biting down on ice. The tire went with a loud, angry sigh. The van slewed sideways and stalled, the wheel stuck against a jut of stone like a trapped limb. The boys inside spilled out, hands open, eyes wide. No one fired, not them, not Miguel. He would not. He refused the physics of panic. He directed them to their knees and kept his voice a metronome, calm, firm, unwavering. "Hands on your heads," he said, and they obeyed, trembling. He backed toward the rear doors. "Helena Rico status?" he asked. "School secure," Helena said. No movement inside. Teachers holding kids in classrooms were in the corridor. "Good," he said, and felt a thread of relief weave through the mess. He swung open the van's rear doors. Inside, a mixed-up inventory, formula, bandages, alcohol swabs, and under them, wrapped tight, firearms cleaned and wrapped like instruments. The hypocrisy made him tired. He felt he could swallow the whole weight of the hill's contradictions and still be thirsty. "Call it in," he said to Santos. "We've got contraband mixed with supplies. Get an evidence team." As Santos spoke into the radio, an elderly woman peered from a doorway, gaze sliding from the boys to the boxes to Miguel's face. "Vai machucar les?" she asked, voice brittle. He shook his head. "No, senora," he said. "Not if they let us do this right." She studied him as if his soul was written on his tongue. "Do it right," she said, and shut the door slowly like a curtain closing on an old play. That should have been an ending. It was. The hill never moved in straight lines. What happened next no one could have imagined. A crack tore the air, a sharp, high shot from above somewhere not close and not far, the kind of shot that doesn't want to start a war but to make you flinch into a place where a second shot can find you. Performance art, Miguel thought with disgust. He pushed the boys flat, pulled Santos back by his vest, felt the edge of a shell of fear brush his ribs. "Sniper," Santos whispered. "Spectator with a grudge," Miguel said. "Keep down." He looked up at the rooftops and saw a figure disappearing over an edge, light on his feet, confidence like a coat. He wouldn't chase. He wouldn't abandon the corridor and leave the clinic exposed. The nurse's silhouette was a still painting in the doorway, her hand a shape against glass. He stood. The choice was a small bridge between danger and duty. He used his voice again, not the kind from a manual, but the kind people could lean on. "It's over," he called to the windows, to the alleys. "No one needs to be a hero. Let the day be ordinary," he tempted fate. Fate blinked. Out of sight on the stair just beyond the clinic's door, someone whispered, "They'll come back," and someone else said, "Maybe they won't." It was enough. The pressure deflated, not into relief, but into the busy, bustling fear that cities learn to live with like a permanent echo. The market gathered its fruit. The path to the school remained open. The hill shook its shoulders and pretended normalcy like a grandmother smoothing a skirt no one would dare remark on. Hours, no longer crisp, softening at the edges, tumbled forward. The day warmed, the smells changing from wet stone to fried fish and gasoline and sun on plastic. Miguel's team did the work that never makes it into headlines. Collecting statements, soothing rumors before they grew teeth, walking the edges of the corridor, letting residents see their faces and hear their names. "Helena," he said at one point as they paused under a canopy of wires where birds balanced like old men on rails. She looked at him with the kind of curiosity that is also concern. "You good?" he asked. "I keep thinking about the kid with the camera," she said. "He wants a story to save him." "We all do," he said, and surprised himself. He thought of his own story, the one with its small, brave chapters and the child chapters that he never reread. He thought of his father's hands, rough and sure, laying bricks, building walls that held in winters and held out rains. Hands that had told him once, boy to boy, that life was a long corridor and you kept it open by walking it with humility. He thought of Anna stirring beans on Sunday, the steam fogging her glasses, her mouth doing the math of a week. He thought of Thiago's obsession with birds and the way Sophia clapped when he made the shadow of a rabbit with his hands against the bedroom wall at night. He had left them this morning like any other morning, transferring love into small gestures because the big ones felt too dramatic for real life. But what happened next, no one could have imagined. At a corner near the mural, a group of men collected in that way that looks like nothing and is everything. Miguel saw the telltale stance, hips cocked, weight on one foot, threats folded into smiles. He walked toward them with his hands open at his sides, neither naive nor aggressive. The oldest among them, a man known as Tuda, whose teeth were thin and gold, nodded with the polite contempt reserved for tax collectors and doctors. "Good day," he said, and the words had edges. "We had an incident," Miguel replied. "We prevented it from becoming another kind of incident." He kept his voice even. He always did. He could feel the tug-of-war between his obligation and the awareness that none of these men had asked for him to exist as he did in their stories. "You're good at stopping people from helping people," Tuda said, chin flicking toward the memory of the van. Mixing milk with rifles is a kind of help no one needs, Miguel said softly. The hill is full of babies with empty bottles, Tuda said, and the grievance was not false, even if the route by which it traveled was wrong. Behind Tuda, a boy's lip twitched. The hill's boys always carried their faces like loaded questions. We kept the corridor open to the clinic and the school, Miguel said. You want your kids in class or ducking bullets? Bullets are a kind of class, Tuda said, and smiled not because he found himself clever but because finding yourself clever can be armor. He pointed at Miguel's chest. Anyway, you will leave and the hill is still here. Yes, Miguel said. And when I leave, someone else will arrive with a different flag or none, and you will still need milk, and your boy will still need to practice what he's good at so he doesn't spend his talent on funeral songs. He surprised himself again. He was tired of proverbs. He wanted a day when the obvious didn't need to be negotiated. Tuda's eyes flicked. You talk pretty, he said, and yet here you are, gun and all. I carry it so I don't have to use it, Miguel said. You believe that? Tuda asked. Miguel didn't answer. Not because he doubted, but because words sometimes are a luxury you don't get to spend. The conversation would have spiraled into a familiar dead end, but there was a tremor in the air, a new presence that rearranged the shadows. A name that traveled without being spoken, Favela. He was a rumor-given bones, not a king but a treasurer of fear, the kind who balanced ledgers with blood. Miguel had never seen him up close, only felt the tide shift when his name swept through the alleys. He didn't want to see him today. Fate is a poor listener. Miguel Alves, the voice came casual, almost friendly. You make my mornings long. The man who stepped into the narrow ribbon of shade was not older or younger than anyone. He was one of those men who seemed to have been born at 30 and never aged a day. His clothes were quiet but expensive in the way only the poor notice, his wristwatch a polite threat. His eyes were flat, pupils like ink spilled and refusing to absorb light. Let's not do this, Miguel said. Let us leave each other room to breathe, Favela smiled. It was not a smile someone keeps for children or dogs. You shot a tire, he said. You embarrass boys who answer to other boys who answer to me. That is a problem. Embarrassment can be contagious. Miguel felt his team tighten around him in invisible alignment. Helena a step back and right. Santos to the left. Rico in the earpiece, moving into the alleys like a motto. The hill went quieter than any morning should. People are at the clinic, Miguel said. People are at the school. Be careful what you turn into smoke. Favela's gaze brushed the plaza the way a rich man's finger brushes dust off a painting he doesn't love. I live careful, he said. My problem is that careful men are often unlucky around you. Then leave, Miguel said, not as a dare but a request. Favela laughed gently, almost kindly. You won't believe what happens next, he said, and nodded in a direction Miguel could not see. A sound then, small but decisive. A motorcycle's cough, a footfall, something designed not to announce but to signal. The next minute blurred and sharpened at once. A shape at the edge of the plaza lifted a weapon, not toward Miguel, not toward his team, but toward the sky above the clinic. It was not a shot meant to kill, but to puncture the air, to cause a wave. It did. Windows trembled. People screamed, not the first panic of the day, but a fresh one, and panic is infectious. Miguel moved like water to a fire. He stepped between instinct and error. No, he said, and the word was a shield. He held his hands, palms out, the absurd theater of it, the ancient trick that sometimes worked. Don't make a spectacle, he said to Favela. You'll lose more than your boy's pride. Favela's eyes softened, like a cat's do before it decides whether to move fast or fast enough. Then, in a choice that surprised even him, he tilted his head. Stand down, he murmured to the men around. It wasn't mercy. It was math. And the day that had been an hour longer than it should have been exhaled slightly, as a roof beam sighs when a storm passes. But what happened next, no one could have imagined. Later, when the sun had climbed and then begun to slide, when the market had resumed selling oranges, and the nurse at the clinic had eased 2 swellings into the world with only a few cries, when the school dismissed early and children ran in knots of laughter that sounded like tomorrow, the van was taken away, the boys booked without bruises, the evidence tagged, the captain relieved and satisfied enough to chew his cigar in peace. Miguel lingered as he always did, walking the edge of the hill with his eyes, saying goodbye to the blades of a place that had cut him and taught him to be careful. He stopped at the mural where saints and soccer stars stared toward the same horizon. A little boy pulled at his sleeve, Mattias's younger brother, Leo, the kind who picked curiosity over safety like choosing the biggest candy in the jar. "You're going?" Leo asked. Miguel smiled at him with the soft muscles he saved for small boys who wanted to be braver than it was healthy to be. "Soon," he said. "Tell Mattias he owes me those G major arpeggios." "He played them during recess," Leo said. "He said the teacher cried a little." "Music does that," Miguel said. He felt the day lay its hand on his shoulder. The weight wasn't heavy. It was simply present. He would go home, he thought. He would smell beans and garlic and his daughter's hair shampoo. He would put his gun on the high shelf and forget it existed for a few hours while he helped Thiago with homework about bird migrations and teased Anna about the soap opera she loved and he pretended to hate. He would tell her about the van but not about the part where Kavera smiled. He would tell her about the little girl under the stairs and how the father's knees had buckled with gratitude. He would sleep and not dream and wake and do it again. He would, he thought. His heart, loyal, believed it. But what happened next no one could have imagined. A phone rang, Rico's voice on the radio, tension like static. "Aguia 3, report near the lower bus stop. A skirmish. Teenage fight becoming something else. We're closest. We need to peel off now." "Copy," Miguel said. "Helena Santos with me." He could have let another unit take it. He could have left. But duty and the fear of a statistic being born in a boy's blood on the curb pulled him like gravity. He moved, the alley's corners turning into slow mirrors. The bus stop sat under a mango tree whose roots had lifted the pavement into puzzle pieces. A small crowd collected the way crows do, interested, opportunistic, jittery. Two boys, shirtless, faces tight with anger and fear and the unexpected thrill of being watched. One held a broken bottle, the dangerous end reflecting the sky. The other bled from the cheek in a thin line that looked rehearsed. Other men older hovered, uncles not by blood but by proximity, coaching with their eyes like bad angels. "Enough," Miguel said as he stepped into the ring. He could feel the crowd take a breath. One boy, the bottle holder, flinched. The other boy puffed his chest. It didn't matter who had started it, the crowd wanted an ending. "That's enough," Miguel repeated. He let his sternness be enormous and his threat be small. "Put the bottle down," Helena said, low, easy, the voice that calmed storms. The boy's jaw worked. He set the bottle on the ground like lowering a flag he never wanted to carry. The other boy deflated a little. Someone in the crowd laughed, relief with an edge. The mango leaves shivered. A motorcycle coughed. And then from the mouth of the side street, the shadow of another old enemy, the opportunist with a grudge, appeared, face masked not by cloth but by the posture of someone who didn't want to be known because he wanted to be a rumor. He lifted his arm and the glint of metal didn't belong to a phone. "Down!" Santos shouted. The sound arrived before the sense of it. A shot cracked, merciless as a fallen plate. The crowd scattered with that terrible ballet you only learn by living too close to danger. Duck, shuffle, roll. Miguel saw the arc of the bullet in his mind before it became history. He reached without thinking to pull a young woman against the bus bench, to cover a child's small orb of a head, to lay his own body into the shape of a shield. His soul lifted its old weight and asked if it was enough. He felt the wind of the bullet. He felt a hammer blow to his side that knocked the language out of his lungs. He hit the ground with a thought he didn't have time to organize, at least not the child. Around him, the day shattered into smaller days. A chorus of voices, two more shots far away, the engine of the motorcycle retreating, Helena's face over him, the gray eyes not steady now but storming. "Miguel," she said, and the name was a rope he held. "Miguel, stay with me." His heart still pounded though the rhythm was wrong, a drummer who had lost count and refused to stop. He felt warmth on his ribs, damp, intrusive, very red. But not everywhere. He could still feel his hands. He flexed them like a warning to the body. "Remain decent, remain whole." "The kid," he said. "The girl, safe." Helena lied in a beautiful voice because that's what you say to men when you're holding them in the doorway between rooms and you want them to choose the one you can still enter. "You're okay." "Don't lie," he said, and smiled because it was easier than the alternative. The sky above the mango tree was a blue he had never resented enough. Leaves were coins of light. A stray dog with an ear folded wrong sniffed at his boot and sat, as if to watch him like a friend watches you when you pretend not to be tired anymore. People cried his name as if saying it louder could keep the syllables from rolling off the table and shattering. Santos' hands were quick heat on his side. Rico's voice was a thread sewing. Marquez's voice in his ear broke and became something human. "Ambulance," he said. "Now, now." The world wavered but did not disappear. It made him angry, then gentle. He thought of the corridor to the school, to the clinic, to the bus stop where in the afternoon mothers argued about plantains. He thought of the hill as a person who had grown old and tired of its own reputation. He thought of the van, of powder-white formula, of rifles wrapped like flutes, of boys' eyes that had looked at him, and decided to live another day because he had chosen not to humiliate them while preventing them from hurting someone else. He thought of Anna, of the curve at the corner of her mouth when she pretended to be offended by his jokes. He thought of Thiago's birds and Sophia's rabbit shadow on the wall, and the way their room smelled like baby shampoo and crayons. If death had a door, he stood with his hand on the knob and his ear against the wood, listening to the party inside, deciding whether to knock. But what happened next, no one could have imagined. The hill drew close. Faces leaned over him like stars collapsing into early sky. "He's bleeding," someone said. "He saved my daughter," the father from the blue house murmured, his voice smashed but resonant. "He saved my baby." Mattias appeared, eyes full, violin case slung like a promise. "Play," Miguel tried to say and failed. The boy understood anyway. He opened his case and took out the violin, and in the middle of a bus stop where the pavement buckled and the mango tree shook its leaves, he played the G major arpeggios, careful and pure, a school assignment turned into a benediction. The air listened. Even the dogs did. Miguel's pain rolled back, then forward. He could hear the note where it always wavered and the note where it always glowed. He focused on the glowing note. "Stay," Helena whispered, her hands pressing, her body bent over his like a roof. He thought about being de Bem, being the kind of man the world could file under good without argument. He understood then, in a way that had only been theory before, that being of the good wasn't a uniform or a promotion or your name spelled correctly on a plaque under fluorescent lights. It was the daily labor of carrying your soul like a cup of water over rough ground, not spilling it when people shoved you, not drinking it all yourself when you felt thirsty, not smashing it because someone else had smashed theirs first. It was protecting the part of you that wanted to hate because hate was a fire you could live inside without noticing it burned you to bone. In that moment, he realized there was no turning back. He had chosen a road that always led him here, to the edge between what ends and what matters. He did not make a speech. He did not monologue. He only listened to Mattias' careful notes and the breath of his team and the sound of his own heart counting down and up, refusing to make simple arithmetic. He knew he was slipping. He wished to be any other man for a single second, so he could tell Anna that he was sorry for every time he hadn't taken out the trash when he said he would, for every time he had been at the hill when the school concert started. He wanted to tell Thiago to keep a list of every bird he sees, and to add his father's name next to the sparrow, because he wanted to be small and common and everywhere. He wanted to tell Sophia the shadow rabbit was never a rabbit but her own hands opening and closing, and that is all any of us are doing here anyway, opening and closing. His hand found Helena's wrist. He squeezed. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them I did." He didn't know how to finish the sentence. He had not been perfect. He had been human. He had done his job and also refused the parts of it that asked him to stop being a person. "I will," Helena said. "I promise I will." He believed her because he always had. The ambulance arrived noisy and late and necessary. Hands lifted him, set him into a gut-bright box. The city slid sideways in the window, hills and houses, wires and sky, faces and none. He watched them pass like a film cut too fast. He pressed his lips to the memory of Anna's forehead as if it were a medal he had won. He let his eyes close not because he was defeated, but because he was full. He felt himself become a story he could only hope would be told with mercy by those who loved him and fairness by those who didn't. The rest of the day turned golden, then purple. The Hill, without him, continued to make dinner, to argue, to broadcast soccer, to bleed and heal, to laugh and plan and trip and get up. In some houses, plates were stacked, songs were played, a baby named after a saint cried. In one house, a woman sat at a table and put her head in her hands because the last goodbye had been ordinary, and that felt like a betrayal. She would forgive the day later. She would tell her children that their father loved them in 1,000 unphotographed ways, and that his last act had been what his first act always was: to step between someone fragile and a world that sometimes forgot the fragility of things. Captain Marquez chewed his cigar as if it could bring back time. Santos punched a wall and apologized to the wall. Rico went home and kissed a crucifix he had stopped believing in. Helena went to Anna's door and knocked with the most careful knuckles in the world and told the truth and not the story. And then later, when the house was full of women and light and rage, she told the story too, because stories are how we pin butterflies to cork, not to keep them but to remember the color. On the hill, people came to the corner where the mango tree grew and said his name and insisted he had been good. Others shrugged and said men in uniforms are what they are, but even those shrugged more carefully that week. Dona Celia set a candle on the clinic steps and it burned without arrogance. The father from the blue house with the broken stairs repaired the steps with his hands and left one plank unpainted in thanks. Leo found a feather and declared it a sign from a sparrow whose paperwork he planned to keep. Mattias kept his violin out of its case more often and played on the stoop until his fingers hurt in the most beautiful way, and people smiled because pain that makes something gentle is a kind of mercy too. Cavera, wherever he went when he went, paused once and looked at the hill and wondered what lines remain after men write themselves over walls. In the precinct, someone typed a report. It broke the day into pieces that fit inside neat paragraphs and got all the verbs mostly correct. It never mentioned the G major arpeggios. It never described how the mango leaves made coins of light or how the dog with the folded ear sat like a witness. It did not say the words hatred and soul in the same sentence. Reports do not. But in a memory that will never be printed, Miguel's voice remained. It remained in Helena's throat, in Santos' jokes that suddenly got better, in Rico's breath when he counted, in Marquez's pauses before he barked, in Anna's kitchen when she stirred beans, and the steam fogged her glasses, and she told the children that their father had been brave because he had chosen not to hate, even when hate would have made the day simpler. It remained in the corridors kept open between corners where danger liked to wait for a slow runner. It remained where it had always belonged. Not in the medal of a badge, not in the promises of a city councilman, not even in the soft applause at a funeral, but in the small, unglorified acts of seeing other people as people when fear begs you to see shapes instead. The sun went down behind the colored houses the way a performer goes behind a curtain, slowly, and with the dignity of someone who knows the audience will return tomorrow. Night arrived with its fanfare of insects and radios. The hill put on its neon like a tired woman putting on lipstick. From a window, a voice sang a love song that was not ironic. From another, a prayer thick with vowels rose and connected to the stars with invisible thread. In one house, a notebook had a list of birds. In another, a rabbit shadow danced on a wall while a child laughed and cried and then slept. Somewhere, the dog with the folded ear curled into himself and dreams of food that always arrives. The moral, if there was one, did not pretend to be tidy. Being de bem, being of the good, was not the same as being right all the time. It was a decision made again and again to keep your soul from becoming its opposite, to carry it in your hands and protect it from the acid of hatred that eats the inside of a person long before it eats the outside. The hill would still be a place where morning could become a question, and evening could become a ledger, and days could become history without asking for consent. But within it were people who held their souls like cups of water and refused to spill them when shoved. Miguel Alves, whose last goodbye had been ordinary because ordinary was what he had guarded, had known this, that a uniform could corrode or it could be a vessel, and the difference was the hand inside it. His life ended where his work always lived, in the liminal space between a child and a bullet, between a van and a clinic door, between G major arpeggios and a man's temptation to be cruel in the name of being correct. And so the story you have just heard does not end in darkness or light, but in the true color of the world, which you only see when you allow all of it into your eyes: fear and bravery, sorrow and joy, law and mercy. Then choose, trembling, to set down hatred and pick up tenderness like it weighs as much. No one has to believe it. The hill doesn't require belief. It only requires a walk back up the stairs tomorrow, a hello at the bodega, a hand on a child's shoulder, a closed hand opening. That is the war and the peace. That is the lesson. And if you ever climb those stairs at dawn and watch the sun crawl over painted houses, you might hear it again, in a violin scale or in a woman's sigh or in the far, small bark of a dog. Carry your soul and do not let it fall. For if you lose it, the hill will make a story out of the place where it landed, and it might not be the story you want. But if you hold it with both hands, even a day that ends in goodbye can be a day that teaches someone how to say hello without fear. That is all a good man is. That is all a good man can be. And that is enough to keep a corridor open in a world determined to close every door that leads to grace.